Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are talking about incremental language development for Wolfram Language in one of an infinite series of meetings about this topic. Okay, we got several different areas to discuss today. Let us start off. Feature space plot option. Okay, so the issue here is we're doing something like a feature space plot, and I wonder whether there are and the question is, when does it display? You know what I'm saying? When does it display? When does it display the literal objects as the things to? Okay, and I can see many cases where you might do this, right? So if I do this, for example, is Brett here? I assume Brett is here. Right. So let's talk about list plot and its analog of this. By the way, this is okay. So here we've got lots of stuff. You know, in this particular case, it might be perfectly reasonable to label only those colors, right? But sometimes I want every single one of these to be indicated with its color swatch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but is there an analogy? If I wanted to have, let's say I was just doing a list plot, okay, and I want to have let's say I'm doing a list plot of where I want the points to be random swatches. How would I do that?
I mean, you could do it with, labeled wrapper. You could do it, with an association with.
Well, let's do the labeled wrapper. So if I say labeled, so I'll say something like, let's just do I squared, and then let's say random color. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I claim this is going to fail.
Why do you claim that's going to fail?
Okay, that's not doing what I want. That's showing the points and showing labels on them.
Right. And so then this is, if you add a third argument to label and say that you want it in the center, which isn't well documented. Then you actually get what you're looking for.
Is it documented at all?
Center as an argument to labeled is documented. It's not documented for list plots.
Okay.
And it looks like it's
do we think labeled with center is the right name? I mean, we want a different kind of wrapper.
I think there's room for a different type of wrapper, sort of a marked, sort of thing, that is the analog to plot markers.
Because I can imagine somebody wanting to make a geoplot with, with a picture of the biggest cathedral in each city or something on the city.
Well, I mean, not even that necessarily. So you plot a bunch of cities, but you want the capital to be a star. Or,
Okay. But how would you do the thing where you plot, mountains with a picture of the mountain as the mountain? No, it's how do you? Well, okay, what does plot markers do? So plot markers would do this, but here, what can I do on the right-hand side there? Let's say open markers. So that's going to be little circles. Why isn't there more choice there about what to do?
Because we don't have that many preset sets of shapes, right? I mean, so the downside with plot markers is that it works per data set.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you put each of those labels in its own little list.
Yeah, I understand. But no, so I mean, I think your point about needing something like marked, except I don't like that term.
Agreed.
Okay, Carl on our live stream is saying the inconsistency between labeled and geomarker can be quite annoying. What is that? So geomarker is Right. That's the marker that says put it here, right? In the geo case, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Which is something we don't have in this case. So that, I mean, the obvious analog would be marker, which is a little weird because this would more naturally be geo-marked, except that's very weird. Is Jose here?
Yes, I'm here.
I was gonna say it's ILD.
Yeah, I thought Jose would be here, but I'm just
So
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thinking GeoMarker takes the 2D position. It's the full position, while for list plot.
Well, you can give the full position. I mean, I could perfectly well say here, I'm assuming that what I could do here, I could say, I squared I cubed or something here, and oops. I'm assuming this would work just fine.
Yeah.
Yes, but the previous situation in which it was taking only the value, it's kind of different.
I don't think it's that different. I think it's just assuming. I mean, GeoMarker just doesn't happen to have an obvious one-parameter family.
Right.
Well, I mean, so GeoMarker has a default shape that it wants to use, but it has the 2-argument form that allows you to say what the marker is.
Exactly. But that's exactly analogous to if we did something like marker here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but would it work also with list I squared, comma, labeled, or marker I something?
But that's not the analogous thing, right? I mean, because this GeoMarker, so let's be clear. I mean, so if we say something like, well, let's just do it. GeoMarker, well, what can I say here? I could say, oh my gosh, what on earth is that? That is a very exotic creature. Wow, that was really weird. I don't know what I pressed on my keyboard to get that. That's interesting. That's like some kind of a weird control key that I pressed. Anyway, okay, 5 tallest mountains in Europe, for example. Okay, let's get rid of the GeoMarker just so we know what we're doing here. Oh, for goodness sake, I hate this way of having to resolve this. But anyway, all right, let's go entity list of that. Okay, great. Mount Elbrus is not in Europe, is it? Wait a minute. This went bonkers, didn't it? Well, anyway, geolist plot. Did this go bonkers?
It doesn't.
No, maybe. Where are these? How could that be?
Add geo range goes to all or to world.
They might be very much to the east.
Oh. Wow, the Alps lost out. Okay. Okay, anyway, not worrying about our geography here, but let's imagine then that on this, so what we want to say is geographics of GeoMarker of hash, comma, hash
You could take a list.
image.
Oh, I see. Okay, yes.
Okay, let's see how beautiful or not this is. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, what's that?
A bit small, but it works. Yeah.
Okay, so now what would happen if I wanted to make those bigger?
There is an option of GeoMarker called scale.
There are aspects of GeoMarker that are awful.
Yeah.
These are really awful. I mean, those are grotesque string options. Okay, so this is a bit of a. And what scale could I give here?
The default, I think, is 1. So try 2.
Yeah, but I mean, 1 units of what?
Oh no, it's too large.
Is that across the image or something? Point 1 or something? Yeah, that's probably across the image. So it's probably in scaled coordinates.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, I mean, that functionality is quite nice, but okay, actually, this is a complaint from Carl on the live stream, which I think is interesting, which is the complaint that geographics doesn't take some of the other, see, that doesn't take, what happened to legended here? So I'm asking.
But it should be outside.
No.
No, this is the issue that we are going to have to kick our way through, that graphics doesn't take annotations like legend did. Okay.
Right. There are things that graphics doesn't know about that, more abstract functions do.
By the way, where should I store this? Devin, do you have where should I be storing this?
You have a folder called labeling, which might be appropriate.
Okay.
There's also one called visualization.
Let's do visualization, because I think it's going to be more general. Okay.
Stephen?
Okay. Yeah.
There's something I should add to this discussion. Something that we've been wanting for a long time for feature space plot is when the data is labeled, like in machine learning. Like, let's say you take 1,000 digits of MNIST that are labeled.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do a feature space plot of that, what you want is to have a legend, an automatic legend that appears. And, that, let's say each point will be colored according to the color in the swatch legend. And there will be all the ones are blue, all the two are red. This is a very, very classic use of feature space plot. Like in marketing pages, we need to do that a lot. Right. Currently, we have to resort to list plot.
Okay,
anyway, so I don't know how this fits into this discussion.
I mean, I don't think that fits directly into this, although I agree that that's very useful functionality.
So let's say we have 30 of those. And then what you're saying right now is that, and again, this is going to go bonkers again. I mean, this is going to be, so what you would like to do is to say feature space plot.
Yeah, that it just works.
And right, what is that doing right now?
It uses the labels as labels.
Is that...
Okay, it's not obviously stupid. I mean, let me ask the analogous question. If I do a list plot of what does that do? Oops.
I don't remember which way it goes around.
Oh, no, I know it goes this way around. So that's using callouts, right? As opposed to, I mean, whereas here, what would happen if I wanted to make these be callouts? In other words, if I wanted to have those things be the actual raw, MNIST digits, but have callouts for the labeling. How would I do that?
You should be able to do it somehow with labeling function, but I don't remember which way it maps for feature space plot off the top of my head.
Okay, all right, let's unroll what the issues are here. Okay, so one issue is, what is the analog of geomarker for ordinary plots? Right, that's one question. Another question is, when there is a value and a label, how to indicate that. Okay, and this is one example of how that's indicated. This is another example of how that's indicated. So I'm saying these are defaults, but the question is there a and presumably the labeling function is an obvious way to do that. But maybe what we need are some, string names for the labeling function that correspond to the things that are useful. See, for example, if this was, who knows if this is right, but let's say that this was labeling function arrow callout.
Which I think that is what that is.
Okay, well, so then let's say labeling function.
If you use labeled instead, I think, does labeled work? Oh, there you see the whole. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's not very good, right? So we should try to make that work.
But it allows you to see what the arguments to the labeling function are, and I agree, labeled should work. Right. So the first slot 1 is the position. Slot 2 is sort of an index into your data set, into your data. And slot 3 is labels coming from different areas.
Well, that's kind of obscure.
Yes.
Okay, so this needs to be cleaned up. By the way, Carl on our live stream is lamenting that callout does not work in geographics. I mean, callout doesn't work in graphics either.
Right.
But why doesn't callout work? I mean, okay, let's just discuss this because it's so obvious how this story has only one way that it can end. Right? Okay, so the issue is if I do a callout of I squared, I, for example, table to 6, whatever it is. Okay, I have that, and I say graphics of that. It's going to be dumb as a stone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay, this is wrong. Okay, the question is, how do we fix it?
And that's a completely different set of people. And we've discussed it probably in the last 6 months, and I don't remember exactly what all the details were.
Yeah, I know, and everybody says it's impossible, but we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
But I don't think it's a different set of people, because I think what's going to happen is that there's essentially an up value here that when it sees there's a call out, it's got to go resolve that. Well, in any case, maybe we should set up a separate meeting specifically about this issue.
This is something that may be easier in geographics than in graphics, because in geographics,
I was going to say, at the moment it would be easier in geographics than graphics, because geographics already has to do a lot of processing.
Right. I mean, to get this to work in geographics.
Right. I mean, the other thing is that really you don't want to do that callback, call out by call out.
For sure. You want to take the whole, the whole zoo here and just, do that once and for all.
Right.
Okay, but let's come back here. Okay. First question, what's the analog of geom? Okay, actually the original problem was, how do we say, okay, so the next question is, when there are lots of things to label, how to indicate how many of them to label.
Right. And I think my most recent suggestion on that email thread was that we use labeling function goes to all to say you want everything labeled.
Yeah, but I think we want an option that just says, max labeled items or something.
Right. I mean, so the fun thing is, so we have an option for this.
What is it?
It's a method option, and it's max labels goes to n. But it's not really max labels. We just didn't have a better name, and so we went with it, even though it's not really accurate. Right. So if you take your colory thing,
yeah,
and you add method goes to max labels goes to 1,000.
Okay, hold on. Mm-hmm. That's going to take forever, so I won't do that. Well, here, let's. What would happen with 100? Does it still do 100?
Okay, so set max labels goes to 50 in that case.
method arrow well, that didn't work.
Well, so the thing is like I said, it's not an accurate name, and so what this option really is what is the number of labels below which I'm going to show everything, and so if there's fewer than 50, it labels it does no points, no callouts, just everything is a swatch. If it's more than 50, then it switches over to the call out and the automatic placement and avoiding and whatever. But it's not, actually, in this case, there's still 100 or at least nearly 100 labels. I think I see 2 off the top of my head.
Yeah, right. I can see them. Okay, so you're saying that. Okay, what would happen if I said okay, so if I say labeling function arrow none,
then you just get points.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so the point is that we've got. Okay, so you're saying labeling function goes to all is the thing that gives everything as a swatch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think that's crazy. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. But I still think we need more control over what's happening. Okay, so let's agree that we're going to do that. Labeling function arrow all gives swatches everywhere.
That's easy.
Okay, and don't forget to document it properly.
Will do.
Okay, but now this question about okay, so what this is the maximum number at which you still guarantee to do only swatches.
Correct.
Right? It's where you switch from swatches. It's the max number where you switch to not doing swatches. Okay, so what effectively that is, in a first approximation, it would be, here's a version, labeling function arrow, and then it would say some kind of conditional expression. If you had a count here of the number of objects, it would be saying if, hash greater than 50, none, otherwise all, roughly. Right. So in other words, this would be, we could have a labeling function thing, which is a super labeling function, which is a labeling switching function that determines, okay. Okay, so what about max labeled items? No, that's stupid because they're going to be more. Well, no, it's the maximum number of items that are explicitly labeled, and max labeled items could either go to a number, which would then have some default behavior like this, or it could go to a function like this.
What if labeling function is a list? The first is the true function and the rest are parameters, like this one.
Yeah, like all comma 40 or something.
Sandra on our live stream is very reasonably saying, shouldn't it take account of the size of the labels? Yes, that's true. I mean, if these are giant, how do we take account of the size of the labels?
I mean, so that's why it switches to the automatic thing eventually. Right.
Well, we also need the label size, which is kind of cruddy in the way that it's specified right now, right? We don't even have that. How do we specify the size in this case here? How do I specify the size of those labels?
I mean, in that case, Where did that? I mean, I'm not sure that we have a control in that particular case because those are, that's the typeset form of those individual colors, right? So those are just, whatever you get when you do red in a standalone thing.
Okay, so I'm going to do this. Why does it do that? Why is it that size? And that is a profoundly ugly thing.
I mean, it's that size because, typically you aren't just looking at a single color, right? I mean, you have your pictures of mountains or something.
Sure, I understand, but how do I control that size?
Is it label? Crap. There is an option for this.
Okay.
I think it's labeling size.
Okay. Which is an option to labeled.
Which is an option to the visualization functions. So you specify it for list plot.
Okay, so let's say 0.1.
You're going to want scale to 0.1 if you do that.
And why did it just do this silently?
Well, 0.1 is a size. It's 1/10 of
a point.
Right. So there's a whole bunch of little tiny.
Okay, so let's say I want 20 point. Okay, it's reasonable enough. It's a little funky that it's okay. So that's like a 10-point sized label. That's not unreasonable. That's pretty reasonable. Do we support that same thing in geographics?
No.
Well, I don't think geographics has anything at the moment that this would apply to.
Well, we could
control geomarkers.
All the geomarkers at the same time.
Right.
Or all the geovectors or whatever.
Right. I would argue that labeled should allow a labeling size option locally.
That's not a bad idea. I don't think it does.
Well, actually, it does as a content size.
I don't know if that's respected in Viz.
Why wouldn't it be? Okay, so let's try this. So let's say content size. So it's inside the labeled. We go content size, arrow, random, enter random real 40.
Ooh. That's a fun message.
The entrails just fell out of the goat somehow. Whatever. Okay. Well, okay, it's a bug to fix.
Yep.
But that should just work. I can't see any reason why any of these options shouldn't be, like for instance, here, I would have thought I should be able to say, presumably, labeled in there, I should be able to say framed arrow true. Frame. Is it frame arrow true? Frame. Okay, that worked. It's a little weird, but it worked.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not sure some of the baseline alignment sorts of things necessarily make as much sense.
Perhaps not. Rounding radius certainly makes sense. Lovely. Okay, so we just got a content size thing to make work.
Yep. We'll double check the others to see which ones.
Okay, so labeling size. So I think labeling size, content size makes sense as an option for geomarker as well, rather than your very weird scale option, Jose.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, but this doesn't tell us the original thing we were trying to deal with, which is switch over from so if I do labeling size here, so let's say I'm doing this one. Let's say I do feature space plot of, like, say, 30, and then I say labeling size. Oh, it's not going to do that because they are labeling size arrow. Well, here, let's pick up one.
It may. I don't remember, how much. I mean, give it a shot. Yeah. Right.
No. Okay. So then I don't think that's obviously bad, that it doesn't do. I mean,
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily wrong. Okay.
Right. We didn't necessarily want to have text get bigger than normal, sorts of things.
Right. No, I agree. I don't think that's obviously wrong. Okay. So those. Why is this taking forever? Okay. That looks reasonable.
Right. And I think it's even the case that, if you increase the number of elements, that the labeling size shrinks a little bit.
Well, is that desirable? I don't think so. I think you tell it to do something, it should do that. If you say
sorry, I mean the default labeling size.
Oh, I see. Okay, fine. That's good. Yeah, labeling size arrow automatic, you're saying, does that.
Right.
Okay, so the main issue is up to what size? So I think we want this max labeled items. That tells us up to how many items we will give labels as opposed to somehow dropping the labels. Now, the other possibility, so then there's a question of how big. Well, I mean, the other possibility is what fraction of the surface area can be covered with labels, right?
Right.
Which would be something like max labeled area. Well, it's that is in the category of very obscure.
Well, and I don't know that our frameworks are sort of
could do that.
Well suited to actually looking at total coverage. But
right. Okay. Fair enough. But then so for right now, max labeled items doesn't seem like a stupid thing to have, because that is analogous to max plot points, right? So in other words, here, if I did a feature space plot with even more things, then I would have max plot points, and then I would stop plotting those points at some point. That makes sense?
Right.
Hopefully that works correctly.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've ever tried max plot points in feature space plots.
Well, probably the underlying feature space thing might take too long anyway. Okay, but so max labeled items seems not completely stupid to me. And we could presumably one day decorate that with which labeling method to use. Well,
I mean, so I'm not sure whether we need the new option or if we're just still extending special right hand sides of labeling function.
I wouldn't extend the labeling function right hand side. I mean, I think it's obscure because I think the labeling function. Okay, what are the arguments that are given to the labeling function?
So the first argument is the coordinate of the element. So I probably need to update the labeling function docs.
Oh, here we go. Value index labels.
Right.
Okay, so another thing it could have as #4 is the total number in principle. Either that, or you've got to have some kind of association or something. I don't know how you would specify it, where it's a switchable labeling function.
Yeah.
Right? Not obviously wrong to give it a fourth argument that's the total number of elements.
Mm-hmm.
List of relevant labels. What does list of relevant labels mean?
So for example, Yeah, I mean, you may have labels coming from labeled wrappers or call out. You may have it coming from chart labels or plot labels, association keys. And so it, collects those into...
Okay, here's my proposal. Okay, here's my proposal. That what we do is we say max labeled items could actually be a list that says, well, blah, blah. It's kind of the wrong way around, right? But that
I was thinking similar things. I mean, it's not particularly elegant, but...
Well, the other possibility is to have a function. You know what? The issue is that labeling function is called on every element, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas if max labeled items had a function that was called on, it's called on each element, right? But if max labeled items was called on every element, it can decide what to do. I mean, if it had a function that was called on the list of elements, then it can decide, if that list is super long, etc. Sandra is suggesting labeling method function. I don't think that really helps, because I think the alternative would be okay, it's a global switch based on the number of items, right? That's what we're looking for. But max labeled items is at least reasonably easy to understand. What were the other options in GeoMarker, by the way?
Color and...
Okay, this is bonkers.
By the way, Stephen, this global switch, we could integrate it with this, the problem and this that I was raising. Is that if there's a lot of repeated labels, then it makes it legend. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch.
Oh, okay.
But
No.
Why? Why are you making that negative sound, Brad? That doesn't seem like such a bad idea.
Having it tied in through... No, I'm completely fine with having it look at the labels and realize that everything is either A or B, and switching to color and creating a legend. I don't think these options are the right control.
Well, the question is, well, that makes Sanders' suggestion about labeling method function not be as silly, because then that's a function that is given the complete list of data. Do we have any visualization functions that are just given the complete list of data to do things with?
You mean options, or?
Yeah, options.
Okay.
I meant options, yeah. I mean, there are things like plot range, which clearly implicitly do that, but do we have a plot range function or something?
We don't have a plot range function. I think...
It's not obvious we shouldn't have
anything that's along those lines is an argument to the viz function. So like histogram takes a second argument that can be a pure function that computes the bins.
It's not totally self-evident to me that plot range function would be a stupid idea. Maybe it is a stupid idea. Maybe the right answer to that is you just compute it and then you feed that in as the option. You just say plot range function. I mean, why? I mean, and arguably this type of thing could be the same thing, except that we want to bank switch it. Right?
Right.
We want to say, Okay. How to do this?
Right. I mean, the other thing that I was thinking as a possibility is that you don't say necessarily what the numeric cutoffs are, but you have the ability to say what's the chain of labeling approaches that you're going to try.
Sure.
Right. So you have marked, call out, tooltip, say, as a list. And it goes through and it tries to directly mark as much as it can. And when that starts causing overlaps, then it switches to call outs to get into more corners of empty space and whatnot. And then when those start and then when those are starting to overlap, then it falls back to tooltip.
Sure.
And then you aren't actually giving cutoffs. You're just sort of as much as possible optimally labeling things.
Well, in that case, the labeling function could just be a list.
Right.
Look, the fact is, we could do this in a slightly hacky way. Okay, if we have max labeled items, well, that's suggesting no max labeled items, but instead, the problem is if I say labeling function arrow, well, the problem is I don't have a way to say labeling function is just the swatch, right? So assuming I had that, but if I said labeling function is callout, then it will never go into override mode, right? It'll never go. If I say callout, it's going to cover every one of these with a callout. True or not true?
No, I think callout still has the ability to switch to tooltip.
Okay, that's not good enough. I mean, that's in other words, that shouldn't be the case. If I say labeling function to callout, then I want labeling function to be callout. I don't want it to automatically switch.
Right. So in that case, it will be callout or dropped.
No.
Oh, I see. So call out even if things end up overlapping.
Yeah. If I say labeling function is callout, that's what I want. Now, what we could imagine doing is to say labeling function arrow and then a list of functions here that are what to do in different cases. And then we could decorate that some more. How would we indicate? What's the best way to indicate? What's the best way? I mean, it's stuff like that, which reminds me a bit of what we're going to do for web page panels in our sort of CSS imitation. I mean, because this is like responsive design type stuff, because I can imagine, oh boy, I can imagine it's going to matter what the image size is.
Oh, it's absolutely going to matter what the image size is, what the labeling size is. Because that gets factored into
all right, so then
the collision code.
What I'm saying is there's a default and yeah, I mean, so there's a I mean, the thing that is frustrating to me is when I say labeling function arrow callout, that's what I want. Okay, the obvious thing to do would be to have a wrapper for labeling function that describes, or an option to the labeling function itself. How would we do this?
I mean, I wonder if we aren't almost
Okay, so what we're
overthinking this.
Well,
right. So how often is it that one of labeling function goes to one of the symbols isn't going to be what you want? All, none, call out, automatic, tooltip. Right. I'm wondering if we're trying to come up with, a design to encompass everything where the solution is actually to have simple settings that are going to cover 99.5% of your.
Except when they don't. But I agree. If you can always then set, so long as it respects what you tell it to do, I think it's okay. Right? But don't start ignoring. If you say labeling function to call out, don't start saying, no, I know better.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is that you still have. I'm pretty sure that feature space plot still supports wrappers to some extent.
You mean like labeled and things?
Yeah.
So you're claiming that if I do this, I say labeling function to false, but I say, well, let's say I'm doing a feature space plot, say random word 10. Okay, so that would normally be like this, some stupid thing. Okay. And now you're saying if I say labeled no. That's just interpreting the whole labeled animal as a thing to feature space plot.
Try call out instead of labeled.
What does a naked call out do? What does it do normally? What does it do if I just say call out?
Nothing. It just.
Okay, so this worked, is what you're saying. This worked.
Right. I mean, and the same with the label, because if you look, the alignments are sort of varying a bit. Right. It's not always. The label. I mean, actually, labeled by default on its own sticks the label underneath, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so that was nice. Okay.
So that gives you your sort of overwritability.
So long as we document it and anybody has any idea.
Right. So we need the marked wrapper.
Right. Now, okay. Right now we have geomarker. Do we not?
Right.
And we have plot markers, right?
Yes.
There is also image marker.
What does that do?
Is that for like image feature detection labeling or highlighting?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that the meaning of marker in these cases is really, well, okay, your argument would be the self marker. I think that the idea that there's a marker and its default is to be a self marker is kind of weird. Because a marker tends to be something that isn't a self marker. If you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we want a different name for the sort of self-representing thing. What would that be?
These things are a bit like variations of inset.
They are.
Although I think people get scared by inset.
And they should.
Agreed.
Do you know how long it took Chris to implement inset? It was like 4 years or something. Sigh.
No, I mean, yeah, there's fun stuff that goes on with inset in corner cases and whatnot.
Yeah. And all the cases where you can have insets, chains of insets that would lead the plot to not have a fixed point in terms of what size it is.
Right.
Okay. But so here, what are some names? Name I hate, direct labeled. That's absolutely horrible.
Avatar.
What the heck does that mean? I mean, I know what avatar means, but I mean, it's like your
it's
mouse
what is the representation for the thing? Icon.
Icon will be closer, but we've got icon data,
and
we've got
iconize. I mean, icon data is not completely unrelated.
It's not completely unrelated. I agree. I mean, look, the issue is if the name was marker, okay? Actually, okay, so the issue is normally, okay, so normally it would be something like, okay, so in list plot, what would it look like? It would be list plot of this, and it's got to say what the marker is, right? So it would have to be that in list plot. It would be
right, except that we have all these, we have the precedent of one-arg tooltip in the viz functions.
Oh, we have the precedent of one-arg callout, don't we? In the case of wait a second, we've got okay, fine. So you're saying there's a one-arg marker as well,
right?
Yeah, which is fine for something like feature space plot. A one-arg marker would be fine because the coordinate, what is, it's like not what you see is what you get, but what you have is what it is its coordinate. You understand what I'm saying? It's
right.
Coordinatizing.
Yes, I mean it even potentially makes sense in list plot. Right, so list plot of marker of range of 10 gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10
plotted out there. Yes. Well, this is sounding pretty reasonable to me. Sandra is suggesting thumbnail, which we already have a meaning to. The advantage of calling it marker is is actually quite useful to be able to put arbitrary stuff there. And it's neither a call out nor a label. It's just the thing itself, right? Which is exactly what plot markers does. So right. I think this makes sense. I think this is a good idea. Okay, so our remaining issue is the Etienne question of legending for a lot of repeated values. Right now, is it possible to legend a feature space plot right now?
I mean, it's probably a very, a relatively manual thing. But I mean, sort of tied in with what Etienne's talking about, I believe, is sort of internally going from one data set to n data sets in some way, perhaps, in some of the cases.
Well, you're saying, no, I don't understand this. I mean, doesn't legended, let me look at how this works. So if I say table legended random integer.
But it's true to be the same at many data sets, right? It's like each data set have a different label.
Yes. Okay, so now I say list plot of this is what's it going to do? Nothing. Why didn't that work?
I mean, so the thing is that the legend, it knows that the legend wouldn't be useful.
Why isn't the legend useful? The legend is perfectly useful here. The legend has, it doesn't know that there's a lot of repeated values there.
It absolutely does know.
But sorry, you are mapping over a number. I'm not sure the construction, the input construction is correct.
What do you mean?
Perhaps, no, the input, so the legended is being mapped on random integer, which is a number.
So what?
Right. I mean, the thing that listplot knows is that you asked for legends, but all of
Jose is absolutely correct. I'm sorry. I'm totally confused here. It should be this. Okay.
I see. Yes.
So what it failed to do was to unionize, so to speak. Why didn't it unionize? It seems like it should have unionized.
I thought that was why you weren't getting a legend in the first place. Is because it, everything was the same blue dot.
Well, I don't know why it's all the same blue dot. Question one.
Well, because you didn't tell it to use any other colors.
Why would I have done? I'm asking it to legend. So it knows from the very fact that I'm saying legend this, it means it's throwing it into legending bins and they should be different colors.
I mean, so the typical case for legended, in the viz functions,
is you've got multiple data sets. You've got multiple data sets.
You've got multiple data sets, and like one of them is, or a handful of them are special, and you want to know exactly what they are.
Right. I understand that, but I'm asking why. Why wouldn't this work? This seems useful to me. And it seems like it should promote these things to different colors and unify them.
Well, once it promotes them to colors, then there's not going to be any union operation.
Well, there is if it's no, it's unioning the zeros. All the zeros are in the same bin because they have the same legend.
I see.
I'm saying union with respect to legends.
Maybe, although I think this is very low on the priority list. Okay. I don't think this is a typical case that I've ever seen anybody.
Well, okay, so how would you do Etienne's case, even if you were doing it by hand?
I would do, like, say, a gather or group by, based on the labels, and then.
Okay. Hey, by the way, another comment on our live stream from Ian is, could we have an option to allow overlaps? Often have a small number of tolerable overlaps. I think we do allow some level of overlapping, don't we?
But right. I mean, so if you look at your feature space plot that's on the left there.
Yeah.
They're like halfway up toward the right. There's a couple of purples that are slightly overlapping, but I don't think we have presently an option to control how that is, a tolerance or something for that.
Right. Well, we could start off having that as a method option because there must be somewhere there must be a parameter.
Right.
I think that seems like a good thing to try.
And that seems like a reasonable amount, a reasonable method option.
Okay, well, so the remaining things, we've got a few other items, and this is for Devon to make sure we follow up on. GeoMarker needs to have its crazy options, made sane. Right? So we've got content size as the thing for scale. I don't understand why alignment isn't an actual ordinary option. And the color, I just don't understand. I mean,
I'm not sure why we weren't able to inherit the color from outside. Maybe Jose remembers.
No, I don't. This preceded my time.
Well, I think this looks crazy. I mean, by the way, I would like to make the point that for some of these things like marker, it seems to me that if you just give a color there, well, if you just gave a color, it would produce the color swatch.
Mm-hmm.
So similarly here in GeoMarker, if you just give the color, it will produce the marker-shaped color swatch. That seem reasonable?
The marker-shaped color swatch.
So in other words, right now, you've got that marker. That's the default marker.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm saying if you say GeoMarker Rome, green, see what I'm saying? So
you get a green square.
I get a green square with a little wingy thing on it. See what I'm saying? I mean, well, right now I get a green. All right. Well, I guess that's okay. I mean,
right, but you do. I mean, it would be nice to have a way of putting something inside the push pin
as a push pin, so to speak. So in other words, you're saying if I do this, but I then say style of GeoMarker, green, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? That seems wrong.
Well, I mean, I think that's it didn't work because it has the color option, right? So
yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I couldn't remember why it wasn't able to just inherit.
So fine. So let's find that out.
Or maybe it was just that we wanted it to be red instead of whatever the default polygon color is or something.
What would it happen if you have a graphics inside and then you say it green outside? Do we color green the whole graphics?
No,
I don't think so.
No, we just say, I don't know whether graphics represents a, restart the stack type thing, or whether a styled green outside the graphic could make the default color of the graphic be green. Probably not. Probably as soon as you start a graphic, it's not. I mean, I could imagine something where you could inherit a color from the outside of the graphic.
I think it is possible to have a graphic inset inherit the color, but you have to explicitly opt into it, and I don't think it's documented anywhere.
Oh, for goodness sake. Okay, let's figure that out and figure out if we can document it.
I mean, it's probably something along the lines of setting base style to a current value sort of thing.
Right. Okay, we have very few minutes here, but I would like to just take a look at some of the other things that we have here.
Right. So I think this one we weren't sure whether you were interested in the graphic or the format of logging.
Right.
I am interested in. Okay. I'm interested in what is the symbolic form of an Apache log. Yeah, by the way, Ian on a live stream is saying just allow or don't allow overlaps. I don't think that will work, because as soon as you have, because we're trying to make a decision about whether, I think it's more complicated than that. I think that I mean, it's like, it's like an electric repulsion algorithm of some kind. Anyway, so come back to this. Okay. So do you understand what I'm talking about? So there's a can we make an event series or something like it? There's probably a different topic than what we expected, and I don't care about the flame graphs as such. I'm sure they're straightforward to make, given that we have a representation of of things happening, so to speak. Get what I'm saying? We don't have a good way. I mean, like this thing with entering functions, exiting functions, and so on.
I don't know how the Apache logs look, but
I mean, Apache logs, I think, are just, something happened. I spit out a line of info.
Somebody's asking when my birthday is. Go look it up on Wolfram Alpha. You'll find it's tomorrow. And I'm outrageously old, but that we already knew. Okay, sorry. You're asking about what the format of Apache logs is? I mean,
I think they would actually fit reasonably well into a data set.
I'm not sure. I mean, I actually don't remember what they are either, but I think they just have a date. They have a timestamp. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think some people who know about what Apache logs look like have to opine on this.
Right. I mean, probably the people who would be well suited to that are actually like the cloud folks, or some of them.
Right. All right. I'll ask about this in the very next meeting that I have. If somebody could Devin, could you send this to Matt, please?
Yep.
Okay. In the microscopic time that remains, let's just see. This is going to be a more complicated discussion.
Yeah, this probably even more.
Yes,
I was going to say, the microscopic amount of time decide that we're not covering this.
Yeah.
So this one is this one is important. The idea is that we are trying to imitate nest while list, which has the property that it returns the last element returned is the first one that didn't obey the criterion. It's a bit weird, but we just wanted to check with you.
Hold on. Is the last one returned is the first failed criterion one?
Yeah. So in the first one, we want
kind of yucky, isn't it? I mean, because usually it's like, I don't want this.
Mm-hmm. Right. But that's how nest while. So it's a bit like it's a criterion for when to iterate, no matter what happens. Or for example, if the first element already fails, it returns the first element because we always return the seed.
Say that again. If you're saying if it fails to iterate ever, we don't return a null list. We return.
Yeah, we always return the seed. In fold list, we always return the seed. Or for example, in fold, we have to return something. So.
Well, in fold, we have to return something. In fold list, we could return just an empty list.
But we document that fold is the last element of fold list.
Well, we haven't yet documented what the last element of fold while is. I mean, what fold while is.
Right, but we have the strong precedence of fold and of nest while.
Okay, so your point is fold while can't just return an empty, can't just return a sorry, so to speak. It has to return something. And that forces us to say that the thing that's returned is the first thing that failed the criterion.
Yes, and to me, it's even more important the fact that nest while, which is so close to fold while, already does that.
Yeah, okay, fine. All right, okay, so then what's your point about fold while list? That it's going to have to do the same thing.
Exactly, yeah. I just wanted to make you aware of this slightly
so
weird.
nest while list.
So I
I'm
have
saying
to,
its last element is the first failure case.
yes. So I have this example there with the square root.
I have to say that until would have been no. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. When the first failing thing. Okay, in a while loop. What do you return? What does while itself return?
Well, while is like do. It's
so while. I mean, it's only doing a side effect, and so its first failure. I see. It doesn't have it doesn't return anything.
Right.
It just does what it does.
Right. Well, we have the opposite case in take while. Take while will not return the first failure. It takes while it's true.
And then it never returns a dead value, so to speak. I mean,
Right.
It never returns a failing value.
Right. So take while can return an empty list. But nest while, it seems like check before iterating.
This requires more discussion.
Okay.
What is this?
Yeah, I wanted to propose something similar to fold while. Something like iterate while you get new things, which is an interesting operation.
It's a fixed point.
It's a fixed point of the whole list. Yeah, if you want.
Yeah. It's interesting. I agree that that's an interesting idea. I mean, I'm not sure that fold is the only case where that's iterate until. I mean, if there's no state, if the function is pure, so to speak, then obviously there's a point at which it fixed points, so to speak, and its definite point, unless it contains random numbers or something.
Right. This is more like I have some generators. I want to make sure I have generated all I can.
I think that's a higher order function, because I think what that should be taking is a fold, a nest, or whatever. Just keep going. Well, some things like nest list will always keep adding something. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, but there are plenty of things. Well, anyway, we should discuss it. But my immediate intuition is that this could be something that has is a higher order function that takes functions and keeps going until their output doesn't change somehow. I don't know completely what I'm talking about there. All right, we should wrap up here. For those who are curious, I am actually, as my birthday event tomorrow, I am going to do a curious pair of, rather than just doing the same meetings I always do, I'm going to do a curious pair of live streamed events. Hopefully there'll be some information about those on social media. Anyway, I'm looking forward to doing that, so we'll see what happens. All right, I think we should wrap here. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to folks on the live stream for their comments. And off we go. See you later.
See ya.
Bye.